Now, what shall we do? See, we're condemned to freedom.
We're condemned to freedom. I like that.
I can't take credit. It's Jean-Paul Sartre.
Oh, of course. I was going to steal it from you, but I guess maybe that's okay.
I wish it were me.
Yeah.
At least I remembered it.
Well, I mean, originality. Is there... I mean, how much originality can we aim for or claim?
I think originality is way overrated.
Right.
I mean, it's not even possible anymore. I mean, you talked earlier about the myriad thoughts that come in and out of your mind in the course of 50 years, the things you've read, the things you've eaten, the people you've known, the places you've been. I mean, who can separate all that away and think what's left is original? I mean, I don't think we do anything that's original. Mm-hmm. I can make pictures that nobody's ever exactly seen before, but they have affinities to paintings by the abstract expressionist painters, the New York School. There are people that, there are poems of mine that I think are original, but yet could be argued to be reminiscent of certain Japanese poets or certain minimalists like William Carlos Williams or Robert Creeley or Clark Coolidge, people like that. So I don't have much faith in originality. What I do have a lot of faith in is the production of endless variants on certain ideas. Mm-hmm. That's what I think. And in fact, I do sometimes write poems that way. I sometimes pillage other people's poems. I take a phrase here and a phrase there. They don't remain. I mean, they change in the course of being chosen, but it's a way of priming the pump.
Mm-hmm. I remember some time ago you sent me a link about an architect who is practicing hip hop in his architecture, meaning cut and paste, right. Sampling.
Right.
And
sampling,
the architecture.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think I responded to you by saying, cool, but isn't all architecture cut and paste?
I think so. Yeah. I think so. I think it has been. It can't help but be that. One of the architects I most admired in the entire world was a man named John Hajduk. John Hajduk was, as you or your viewers might know, for many years dean of the Cooper Union School in New York. He was a non-building architect. All his architecture occurred on the pages of books, of which he put together 5 or 6 beautiful books. He produced what he called masks, not the kind you wear, but the kind you enact, celebrations of parades, of portable architecture, buildings with wheels. I loved his work. I interviewed him at Cooper Union for the CBC a long time ago, obviously before he died. And he was startling. He was just absolutely riveting. God, I couldn't get enough of him. I remember I was talking to him, my tape recorder was there running, and he stopped and he listened and he ran over to the window, through the window of his office window, and a guy pushing a hot dog vendor with a steam whistle went by. He said, come, look. I said, yeah, it's charming. He said, no, it's not charming. It's the future of architecture. It's what architecture should be. That was the kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Boy, I can't tell you how much I love that quick associative quality. Mm-hmm. This reminds me of that. Mm-hmm. This might be useful for that. Who knows what we can make of that? Yeah. God, I love that.
High level of imagination.
Incandescent.
Yeah.
I loved it. I have a big library. Not big library. 5 or 6 of his books.
Do you feel I'm the interviewer, right? So I can ask stupid questions.
You can ask anything. Yeah.
Do you feel you're more imaginative now than you were before?
Oh, infinitely.
Again, I guess that's interiority was becoming
infinitely.
More,
I trust myself more. I don't put these sort of false barricades, false curtailings on myself. I'm free to do whatever I want, and I'm beginning to risk things. I'm beginning to make errors of taste. Thank goodness that I would never have permitted myself.
It's another good title for a show, I think.
Errors of taste. That's a wonderful idea. Yeah, that's great.
You said it.
No, but things I would have been embarrassed about and painted out or ripped out of the page. Things I just don't need permissions. I don't need praise. I don't need encouragement. And the freedom of being able to do whatever I want is just becoming very heady. I didn't feel this way 20 years ago, not 10 years ago, probably. Mm-hmm. So as I get older, my time dwindles, and the nuclear clock's only got 30 seconds left on it. I'm a little bit pissed off that I won't have time to do all the things I want to do. Probably.
I get that sentiment.
At your tender age?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know me.
If I could be your age again, listen, you know, you're 4 years younger than I was when I met Malgorzata, and we've been together for 20 years, so, you know.
And I've been 20 years with my partner, so we
it's
met
an
around.
achievement, right?
Yeah.
But when the partner is right, it's not an achievement, it's just inevitable. Achievement's only something you have to work at.
Well, our partners, they help us along. They help us grow.
Oh, greatly.
We see things differently with their help.
Absolutely. There's hardly anything I do I don't pass before Malgorzata, who, in my estimation, is an excellent editor of writing and has an excellent eye for the visual stuff. And I very much.
She practices photography herself.
She's a painter. Those are things all over of hers. She's a very good painter.
I've seen her photographs. I haven't seen her paint. I've seen her photographs.
She's done some of that, but mostly she's a great watercolorist.
How did you meet?
we
Online?
No. We met because of my completely absurd faith that bookstores were a healing experience. When in 2003, when I was 63, I had what turned out to be just a volcanically high blood pressure. I should have died. I mean, it was like off the scale. I was feeling sweaty and dizzy and terrible. And so what happened to me usually was when I felt awful, if I went out and browsed in a used bookstore, I would feel better. It would calm me down. I love bookstores. I still do. So I go to this bookstore in Toronto. I walk there and I'm puffing and I'm a fat old man. Jeez. I weighed twice what I weigh now, I guess. And I notice in the store, I don't see her, I hear this mellifluous voice, this beautiful voice, which, because I have a very bad ear for these things, I mistake as a Russian accent. I thought she was a Russian expatriate, a Russian woman who had come to this country. So immediately in my overheated, passionate way, I decided how wonderful it would be. I would rescue her I was sure that she lived in a single room with a samovar and didn't know anybody, and she was incredibly beautiful, and I would take her away from all that. You know, in fact, she wasn't Russian, she was Polish, still is, and married, unfortunately, to somebody else. But never in my life, and I'm just not this kind of person, but never in my life have I wanted something so badly as I wanted.
At first sight.
I pursued her relentlessly. I mean, in a way, it wasn't as tragic as all that, because she and her husband had grown up together as children, and it wasn't really love. It wasn't really a passionate, loving marriage. It was just a friendship, kind of, in a way. So he survived, and so anyway, so it was in this bookstore, you know, and so in order to gain more knowledge of her than just seeing her across the room, I started asking her if she had any holdings in reasonably obscure authors. John Cooper Powys was one of them, and so she would go up the ladder and look and come down, and she'd say, "Why are you interested in him?" And I would tell her for 25 minutes, and we had this long talk, you know, about this stuff, and I fell madly in love with her, and that's how it happened in the bookstore. You know, think if I'd gone to the wrong bookstore.
Do you remember which bookstore?
Yeah, it's called 10 Editions. It was on Spadina near the University of Toronto campus.
Very good.
Not there anymore.
Oh.
Unfortunately, like most great used bookstores with thousands of books and layers of dust and ladders, it's not. They don't exist anymore. Nothing exists anymore. There used to be tons of bookstores, but it's gone too.
I used to live near the Rosedale Library.
Oh yeah,
and
another
It
great
was a marvelous place just to hang out, and the owners were
great. Yeah,
artists.
I know. Yeah.
I remember they had a gallery for a while above it, and so
I love that store.
John Bentley Mays was there once, and I remember getting to meet him. Not your favorite person. We can cut this out if you.
No.
John Bentley Mays.
Yeah. What about him? No, I didn't hear.
Did you know him?
Yeah, of course I knew him very well.
Okay, sorry.
What were you saying about him?
He was there once, and I remember.
Was speaking or what?
He was there for the art. No. It was a book signing.
Oh.
So he had just
He published
Yeah.
his depression book.
And I remember going
Black
up to
Dogs.
him, and saying, "Your book, In the Jaws of the Black Dogs,
Right.
was transformational for me because it was written in the early '90s, I think,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was just coming to terms
Yeah,
with
that's right.
depression, whatever." And his response to me was so funny and diminishing, unfortunately, for me, because he said, "I wasn't really written for you."
Yeah, that sounds like the
That
John.
sounds like
Sounds like a John we all knew and loved, right? You know, there was a time when Canadian art was having its 10th anniversary or one anniversary, and they gathered all the people who wrote for them at a cafe in downtown Toronto. And John was there reluctantly, and I was there reluctantly, and we had the stupid picture taken, which appeared in the magazine. And we were walking away together. John and I were walking away together, which was unusual. And he turned to me and he said, "Did you ever think it was going to be like this?" I said, no, not really. He was a disappointed man. A brilliant writer.
Yes.
Didn't like painting very much, but he was very good at writing about other things.
Yeah. It's tough. It's not easy, is it?
What, being a writer? Being
Well,
a art writer? There aren't any anymore, you know, not in Toronto.
Well,
anyway.
being unhappy is tough, and being, expecting things maybe to go a certain way and they don't, or maybe that, other, not having enough community, if you will, or people to share
that's true.
your feelings with.
Yeah, John was lonely.
His writing could be lonely.
He was from the southern United States. He still kept that Louisiana accent, you know.
Yeah.
He's so much displaced. He struck me as kind of like a Truman Capote without the community.
Yes.
You know.
Or Jasper. Well, Jasper Johns was
Jasper
from
John,
South
another
as well.
southerner, yeah, displaced southerner, and so was
Rauschenberg as well, and they.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating how Rauschenberg talked a lot, and Jasper Johns talks still to this day very little.
Very little, yeah.
What do you think of that kind of partnership? Or maybe because I think they were partners for a while.
Yeah, they were lovers for quite a long time.
Early days in the loft in New York.
Yeah, they went their own ways.
And their work is so different, and yet
Right, yeah.
it kind of crossed during that sort of post.
I always thought there was a lot of pretentious jerk about Jasper Johns. I loved Rauschenberg's work. I loved his raucous, slap on the back kind of let's have fun attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Johns was so priestly, you know, he was so churchy.
Mm-hmm.
However, he did some lovely things, especially early on.
Mm-hmm. Kind of revived encaustic painting in Hawaii too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but there are a lot of people painting on encaustic, and I always resented how the touch of encaustic was supposed to, ensure a kind of magical aura about your work. I never thought it really worked that way.
No. Connecting somehow with history or.
Yeah, the kind of, aligning yourself with, Renaissance mural makers or something. I mean, it was okay. It was just a tool. You use it well, you don't,
Are there any painters that you're looking at today that you or just discovered or still excited by?
Oh, well, I have, geez, it's such a vast question, Dimitri, because one remains excited about the people one was first excited about. I mean, I can still be driven crazy by a Rothko or an early de Kooning or an early Rauschenberg. But I discover new paintings all the time by people I really like. And also there are older painters that I realized I didn't know beans about, and I'm finding out about, and therefore for me they're new painters, like Hans Hofmann, who was a great teacher of the New York School and was a legendary mentor to many of the people.
He influenced many people.
Yeah, many, right. So the people like that. And there are a lot of newer people that I've become very excited about, that I didn't know anything about before. Mary Heilman is one of them. I think she's a wonderful painter. There's a whole list of people. After knowing the work of Antoni Tapies for years and years and years, I've only now begun to discover what kind of a person he really was, what kind of an artist he was. I'm mad about Tapies now, late in life. I mean, I've known who he was for 30 years.
Why so?
Why?
Yeah.
Because there's somebody who is so absolutely, viciously, titanically personal that he just didn't see any reason why he couldn't do anything on rub his elbow on the canvas or write an X or something. I mean, he just did whatever he wanted all the time. I just loved that.
Mm-hmm. What about the late work of Guston?
I, it seemed to me that once you get past the cataclysmic change of subject, the beautiful brushwork is still there.
Yeah.
And what one admires about Guston's early paintings is still there to be admired in the later ones.
Craftsmanship, yes.
Craftsman. I mean, he was a wonderful painter.
Mm-hmm.
I find some of the later pictures hard to take just in terms of their
Content.
initial vulgarity, which you have a hard time getting over sometimes. But the quality is there,
Mm-hmm.
and he's always going to be a wonderfully important painter.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can deny him that.
You have offspring who are artists, or one or two offspring.
My daughter Julia
yeah.
is a big deal painter somewhere. She has there's a big fat coffee table book about her work actually. She's I guess been painting for a decade or something. She's done awfully well. I mean, she has painting at the AGO, and I think she's a painting in the Guggenheim actually.
Wow. I remember visiting her in New York when she was doing her master's. Yes, Jamie and I
really, I'm surprised.
connected with her. I don't know how that happened, other than that we were there and she was studying. We had a lovely lunch, and she was just in doing her master's. But going to New York was a transformation.
Well, that
for
was
her,
a really great thing to
Yeah.
do. I mean, that's one of the mistakes I made. I made several profound mistakes in my life, and one was staying in Canada and not going to New York. I mean, Art Forum asked me to write for them, and I actually put it off for so long. They finally wrote letters saying, "Look, we really mean it. We really like you to write for us," and I still didn't do anything about it. I mean, I did all these stupid things, where I wrote a review of a book by Dory Ashton. It was about Joseph Cornell. She wrote me a wonderful letter saying, "Please come and see me in New York." I didn't. Al Held, the painter I greatly admire, I wrote a review on Canadian art about a show of his. He wrote a note to me saying, "Your review has actually been a help to me in the studio." Can you imagine? Did I do anything about it? No. I didn't follow up on these things.
But he said it. He said that, and you did that.
But I didn't do anything. I didn't go and see him.
Well, you reviewed him. You reviewed him.
I didn't.
Your review of him influenced his work.
I know, but
that's beautiful.
But I could have had this wonderful
other
continued
relationship.
We could have been pals. I mean, it was, I should have been on the next plane for God's sake. So I mean, if I complain sometimes about isolation, it's partly my own fault.
Right.
And Julia did have the wit to go to study at the Parsons School and to go to New York. I mean, look, if you have a studio visit in Toronto, and a couple of boring writers for the newspaper come, or some ne'er-do-well gallery owner comes, great. She has a studio visit in New York. Guess who comes? People from the Guggenheim, people from the Whitney. I mean, come on. It's just because of
being in the right place.
Yeah,
and being at the right institution.
Yeah, and it's taken me 80 years to learn.
And talent too, obviously.
Some.
But where does will come into it, and willing something to be? Do you think, as opposed to? I mean, there are a lot of talented singers, there are a lot of talented musicians, but they don't.
Well, I think it has to do with the people should start taking university courses in self-promotion. I think that it's an art, a skill.
But strategizing that way could also be detrimental to the work.
It could be. I guess it depends how you handle it. But it's if you don't, nothing happens.
A balance, some sort of
a balance is good.
Between your interior life and
if you don't do any self-promotion at all, I mean that's it's just nothing happens.
Although it's a challenge to figure out how you see yourself in the world, right? How you, so that you can better establish boundaries. To protect and also to engage, that wall that exists for all of us between the universe, the world, and our imagination, or our souls, if you will. That's hard to establish, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's partly established for you. It's I don't know quite how to answer that, because it has to do partly with desire and the profundity of your desire, but that desire is more often than not, curtailed by forces you don't have any control over. I can't make people come here and look at my paintings, for example. one of the reasons I'm a little bit annoyed about, there's an irritation in me that's undeniably there, and one reason it's there is because I myself, and again, I have nobody to blame but myself for this, in writing about other people for 40 years, it got so that nobody would take my own painting seriously.
Mm-hmm.
They would all assume, oh, isn't it nice he paints and keeps his hand in, but he's really a art critic. I hate the concept of art critic, and I always said never was an art critic. I was a writer who often wrote about art.
Mm-hmm.
I knew people who were art critics. I had a great friend named Kenneth Baker, who was, for years, 30 years, the art critic of the San Francisco Chronicle. That was what Kenneth wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to be an art critic, and he was. And he was a very good one. I never wanted to be an art critic. It all happened sort of as a sinister accident, and it meant that I sealed my doom. I couldn't get people to look at my work. Had I been in New York, where boundaries were a little more fuzzy, like Donald Judd, for example, who wrote, it wouldn't have mattered. But it mattered in this horrible middle-class compartmentalizing culture of Toronto, that, you were an art critic, so that's what you are, and you do not want to, you should not be showing me your paintings and expecting me to take them seriously. I painted better than 75% of the people that I wrote about, if you ask me, and I can't, I can't force people to see that.
No.
And as we slide into an authoritarian, pre-fascist world of dumbing down, where Richard Hofstadter, American history professor, wrote a book in the 60s called Anti-Intellectualism in American Life. Well, he didn't know the half of it. I mean, we live in such an anti-intellectual culture that people are losing their ability to read prose or poetry with electric attention, or to see paintings. I could identify a brushstroke, for example. I could tell a de Kooning brushstroke from 100 yards, or if you'd done one brushstroke, and I would know it was de Kooning. I could read that. People can't do that.
Remember that book by Malcolm, what's his name? Blink, about expert viewing. So that Malcolm Gladwell.
Oh yeah.
Right. It's a book called Blink.
The tipping point guy.
Tipping
point. Yeah. But I mean, we're losing the ability to read things. So I don't think people can look at a painting that I've done. I think has lots of meaning and value, and see any of its virtues, because it takes a kind of schooling.
Yes.
By the way, we're circling way around to talking about your architecture students and my architecture students as were, and what I think the students in disciplines like architecture need is what the university is not going to give them, which is courses in literature, writing, photography. I think they have to have the infusion of all these other ways of looking.
Well, it depends on the school. Some schools do offer it more than others,
Well,
and
maybe,
some not at all.
By and large, it's
limited.
It's something that runs through all of education, where people are not cross-fertilized enough.
I agree. I agree with that. I mean, I teach at an institution, and I think what I bring to it is I teach at an institution that actually is called the Department of Architectural Science. And, for me, of course, I don't view architecture as a science. I think there is science and technology. That's part of it, but the other, let's just say 50-50, the other part is art and culture, if you will. And it's really important not to separate those two things, to actually consider them as one, to speak about being whole.
Yeah.
If we want to be whole as people, and we want the architects that we train to be good architects, I think fundamentally need to understand that architecture is built for people and animals, of course.
Yeah, exactly, and people are messy, and I think that, it takes some of the artists who were and who not any longer, like Miro. Poetry was of the most incredible importance to Miro. He knew poets, he cherished them, he put words in his pictures, he read poetry all the time. People have to be, tinctured with these other disciplines, because it enriches what they do.
Even a little bit will work.
Yeah, a little bit helps. And I find these walls between the disciplines very depressing. And
Isn't that kind of a product of modernism, though? This idea that we fragment disciplines into, we have the white cute gallery or black theater, like a black box theater, where we isolate one art form from another.
I guess.
And in terms of science as
well,
well.
I'm not saying that. I mean, things shouldn't be properly presented in order to concentrate on them. I mean, there's an artist I quite admire for bizarre reasons named Richard Tuttle.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Tuttle does little pieces on throwaway cardboard and stuff with gravy spots on them and stained mattress covers and all sorts of stuff. And he does it with a certain panache, a certain genius, though we can't talk about it worth a damn, but he does these things. And he happens to be an expert, a world expert on the history of tapestry, for example, about which he knows a phenomenal amount. And he knows other things, and I really like that a lot. Because I think that and somebody was saying, I guess it was Malgorzata, my wife, was saying, we're looking at a video of Richard Tuttle, a show of his in New York, and we're looking at a piece was nailed on the wall with a nail, cardboard nailed on the wall. And she was saying, if you put that out on Bridge Street, wherever you live, nobody would notice it. It's just garbage, right? It needs the configuration.
Placement.
It needs the isolation. It needs the concentration space, which is fair. It doesn't detract anything from the work to say. It needs the cogitation space, so you can see what.
But what about the painting that is purely about paint and pigment? And I mean, your work, for example, is figurative, it's abstract, it's representational, it's very illusory at times.
My work has qualities of abstraction.
Yes.
Everything is abstracted, but I don't think I've ever painted a purely non-representational picture. Everything has some sort of is tethered somehow.
Do you think it's possible to be non-representational when everything we do and say and create it is mediated?
Well, I think it's pretty hard. You could set out to do something like three horizontal bands black on a white canvas, and somebody's going to say
it represents something.
It looks like a foundation, or it looks like a superhighway from the air or something.
But they're representing an idea.
Yeah, sure.
So it's always a represent.
But I very much like painters to get as close as they can to making things that look like nothing except what those pictures are. And that may have to do with dalliance, love affair with pigment itself, or
right. But also pictures are pictures, and I love the idea of the limitations of things as kind of complete worlds.
I love the
idea
that they are exactly what they
microcosm
are, nothing else.
The universe.
Something Richard Tuttle nails a piece of cardboard to the wall is something I've never seen before. It never existed before. I don't care if it's made of valuable material or garbagey material. I've never seen it before, and I'm interested in that, and he's interested in that, and Also, Tuttle is so smart, though he's so frustrating because he can drive a truck between his words. But he's so smart. I remember him standing beside, it's on video, standing beside a wall piece. It was cardboard with, I think, a thread hanging down from it or something. And it was nailed to the wall. And he says, it strikes me that the interior of a picture is warm and the edges get colder. And he said the nail helps to lower the temperature. And I thought, oh God, what a divinely silly but wonderful idea. What a wonderful idea. Changed my day. Not because I'm going to go and do anything about that, but I just thought, talking about not having boundaries, talking about not having permissions, how wonderful that he doesn't feel he needs permission to say something that outrageous.
I would have thought the nail warmed things up a bit because of the energy.
Oh, that's because you're an architect.
Oh, there you go. If I was Catholic, what would the nail mean?
Well, I do know for sure that cardboard is warm.
True.
So anything that's harder than cardboard is probably
cold. Yeah, that's true. I was thinking.
But anyway, you take my point. It was just I loved his permission-free decision to say something that I don't know how many people are going to understand it. Maybe everybody, but it's a wonderful thought. And here's what the thing that's important. I've never heard that thought before. That's what I cherish.
And that's originality in a way, isn't it?
I guess. Yeah.
In terms,
yeah,
that moment, and expression.
It's a synthesizing
expression.
moment. Yeah,
Yes.
right. We know about cardboard. We know about
Yes.
nails. We know about
Yes,
walls. We know
yes.
about light. But it's a synthesizing moment.
Yeah.
Bring it all together. And I went, eureka.
And I mean, we could probably continue talking about that piece.
Hmm?
I mean, just in terms of the value of the materials, cardboard as an industrial material.
Everyday material.
Yes.
Yeah.
That obviously is perishable.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Curatorial nightmare.
did Clay paint on cardboard because he couldn't afford canvas?
That was the case one time, but now it's very chic.
Yes. It reminds me of
It comes out of a movement in a way. There was a movement, you remember, called Arte Povera.
Yes.
It was born out of the street kids in Milan picking up garbage and making things out of them.
Yeah.
And the artists have swooped down on this and thought, what a great idea. It was a way to be anti-slick, but it resulted in a new kind of freedom.
It's
And
interesting.
my much beloved Antonio Tapias is a part of that sensibility.
Very good.
Yeah.
I like that kind of stuff too.
Me too. I
Yeah.
find it freeing. I find it
Yeah.
really liberating.
Yeah.
Tapias is a great big picture. There's some black paint on, and then he has 2 white woolen socks glued on it. I think it's wonderful. Not because they're socks, because they're sudden white J forms on a big empty space. I thought that was great.
There's a newish book out. It's an OCAD publication called Lively Object. I don't know if you've come across it yet. It's a edited book with essays about it's about reclassifying the institutions, reclassifying museums.
That's what time just had those ideas. That's a good idea for OCAD.
And it's a curatorial idea that having the objects, whatever they might be,
Excuse me.
have their own agency, their own meaning,
Yeah.
and like the nail and the cardboard, putting those things together, I guess Picasso did it as well, creates a new meaning, or creates the opportunity, at least, for curatorial.
If you do something like that, you have to be prepared for
observations,
99.9% of the people in the world aren't going to give a crap. But that's not the point.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Music. What music? What do you listen to?
Music?
Yeah.
Oh, I love jazz.
And
I grew up in classical music, and I'm, Malgajad did too. And we have a great stock. There's a room down the hall called the Music Room. It's just lined with CDs and DVDs.
Great.
We both grew up in classical music, and we listened to a lot of it. And like a lot of other pedantic people, I'm trying to teach myself opera, which is not easy, but I'm enjoying it. But mostly, the easiest music for me, that I can throw myself into without consideration, is jazz. I love jazz so much. Right now, I'm trying to learn everything I can. This sounds so silly. It sounds so dated. I'm trying to learn everything I can about Duke Ellington and his various bands over the years. A great musician with great people who played for him. Duke Ellington's men were, loyal to him for like 30, 40 years.
He must have been
Cat Anderson played with him for 40 years.
He must have been very good to them.
He was very good to them. My friend Gene Denovi played with Duke Ellington for a while. He was a young pianist in New York. I said, "What do you remember most about Duke Ellington, Gene?" He said, "I remember in the evenings he'd say to me, 'Go and get some ice cream, will you?'" We'll buy some ice cream.
No, was it Duke Ellington that was classically trained?
Oh yeah.
Yes, that's right. And Irving Berlin was not.
No.
Yes.
No.
Right.
Irving Berlin couldn't even play on the white keys of the piano. He could only play on the black keys.
He knew music.
He couldn't read music.
Melody. I mean, he knew.
Great tunesmith. I mean, he was in his bones, but he couldn't read. He couldn't even read music. Other people would write it down for him. He couldn't read his own tunes back. But a great composer. Yes.
Yeah. That interests me as well. The kind of, the organic or natural way of being in the world.
Well, you were talking when you were setting up your photographic equipment about there's something to be said for just never mind studying and learning and expertise. Something to be said for throwing yourself into an experience and learning from your mistakes. I mean, that's what Irving Berlin did. He was born a poor kid in some rural part of Russia.
Isn't that where innovation comes from, though? I find that institutional learning is very useful, of course, to be guided. But ultimately, like Einstein or Freud, they were out and left feel.
The real stuff is you just do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think being guided by academic authority, taking courses, it's all very nice. It's actually quite civilized
Yep.
and possibly enjoyable, but it doesn't give you anything
Mhm.
in the long run. I mean,
Mhm. Did you hear the recent podcast on ideas? I love our program on CBC on Michelangelo.
no.
I invite you to. I'll send it to you. It's really interesting. It talked about how everyone. It talked about his poetry. I didn't even know he was a poet.
Yeah, so you
Yes.
wrote a lot of beautiful sonnets. Yeah.
And he actually considered poetry to be very important to his practice.
Absolutely, yeah. He
But we
did.
don't usually think about him that
I
way.
have
And
a nice volume of
yeah.
Michelangelo's poetry.
yeah,
Yeah.
of course you would.
Sure.
You know, there's this perception that everything was easy for him, that he could just whip off
Are you
a
kidding?
marble.
God,
But in
no.
fact, he was really hard on himself.
Nothing could be further from the case.
That he
Oh,
really
yeah.
pushed himself.
He exhausted himself.
Yeah, exhausted himself, and he also lived to a very long ripe age. He was an art star at the beginning, but it didn't alleviate. He didn't become soft.
No, never, no.
He was always hard.
Yeah. I
Gary-
used to love ideas. I did a few of the programs myself
with Paul Kennedy.
with the help of Lister Sinclair, the late, great Lister Sinclair.
So before Paul Kennedy, was there another
Yeah,
host?
yeah.
Yeah.
Lister Sinclair was the host. I
Thank you.
love Lister Sinclair.
And now the new host is excellent.
I don't
Not
listen
yet.
to CBC anymore. You know, I produced a quite popular current affairs show called Morningside for 5 years. I was the executive producer.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, 5 years of my life. And I was 3 hours live every day of current affairs, and Lister was a mentor to me. I mean, he was a very big help to me. I remember we went to the CBC coffee shop one day, and I was very distraught. I said, Lister, I can't remember anything. I can't keep an idea in my head. It goes in one ear, out the other. He said, oh, it's just the information age we live in. We all have too many ideas. You shouldn't be expected to remember everything. I said, but something. He said, don't worry about it. I mean, he was very calming. I love working with Lister. I did some ideas programs with him. That program, which involved my interview with John Hayduke, that was from a 4-part program called Changing Attitudes, Changing Ideals in the Arts. And I talked to him. I talked to, who's the great artist? Michael Graves.
Michael Graves, yeah, who passed away.
And I talked to
years ago.
Julian Schnabel, and I talked to some other people.
So
I talked to Mark Halperin, who wrote a novel called The Winter's Tale,
Right.
and some other important books.
I'm going to do some digging around. I hope it's in
Oh,
there.
I don't think I think it's long past this, Dimitri. It
No,
was
but
in
they've posted
80s,
these things
586, something like
They
that.
were all recorded in
Oh, I know, but I don't. It'd take an archaeologist to find it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should just let it go.
Well, I think there is wonderful value in documenting this discussion we're having here.
So
for
do
example.
I. That's different. This discussion is. I'm glad it's on tape. It's delightful to know that it now exists as a separate entity, but I do also think there's a kind of a fruitless want and passion for preserving every speck of the past.
Mhm.
I mean, some things we just let them go.
Let
I
them
think.
go, and that's fine too.
Yeah, I think so.
On that note, I'm going to. It's getting dark.
Yes.
The afternoon it's winter.
Don't you
it's
like the natural
December.
kind of transition?
I love it. It's very soft. The lighting in here is very soft.
Like God's rheostat is
Oh.
turning down the light. I love the diminishing of the light. Though I wouldn't want that to apply to my actual life.
No, because tomorrow is another day.
Hopefully.
I haven't checked the weather report, but we'll have good days and bad days in the future, I'm sure. I want to thank you for today. I hope we could do a part 2 sometime.
I think that would be charming.
And you'll invite me back to your home, or perhaps you'll make it out to Warkworth, and we can sit.
That would be
in my
delightful.
space, yeah.
I would suggest you bring Jamie next time we have lunch or dinner, but I don't want him to be bored sitting around while we do this.
I think he would enjoy it very much.
Maybe.
Thank you so much for your hospitality, and until next time.
It's been lovely having you here.